Hello everybody, Luke Scholder, Field Agronomist for Beck's Hybrids, and I think many of you are faced with the same situation we are here today. That planting window of May 10th through 12th, some of that corn has developed a significant crust because of that big rain and then the ebbs and flows of the weather that we had after that on the night of May 12th. And this ground is no different. As you look down the road, you can see our stand certainly isn't perfect, far from perfect, and it's not what we desire. But if you zoom in a little closer here, this crust is pretty thick. It's not only thick, but it's wet underneath. You can see we freed up a plant here as we pried that off, but probably the same thing many of you are faced with. If you look down the road to the more forgiving ground, you can see a lot of that corn is up. It's got the rounded leaf out, that coleoptile leaf is out. So we're wondering, how do we free this corn? How do we salvage this corn and not have a replant situation? And here in just a little bit, Tyler's going to come through and utilize our planter with some settings that we're going to speak of. But how can we free this up? But at the same time, what are we going to do, or what potential destruction are we going to do to this corn that has a little more height and is actually growing pretty good? So we're in this same field where the crust occurred, but now Tyler's come through here with the planter trying to bust that crust. He's lifted the row cleaners. He set the seed opening disc down to about 3/4 of an inch because he has to break through that entire crust. He's got the closing wheels, all the spring pressure off, and he's just trying to maintain enough ground contact to keep it in the ground to bust that crust. But now as you come closer, you can see what he did to those plants that we're probably primarily concerned about is how bad did he hurt that V1 corn. This corn looks pretty rough. If you look at it first glance, it's kind of some leaves cut and some chewed up, but that plant's intact. Move to this one, that plant is intact. We work our way down the row, you can see it looks pretty rough, but in a matter of a few days, especially with our growing conditions, this corn will be further ahead than anything we put in the ground here more recently. But as you can see, it's not as detrimental to the corn that's emerged as you might think with the aggressiveness of a planter. So as you can see, when it comes to successfully busting through that thick crust, tough to do with the rotary hoe consistently. Oftentimes we don't have enough weight, or the spoons on the rotary hoe wheels are wore out. But you can see as you look down the row how consistent we could do that with the aggressiveness of a planter. If you zoom in here, you can see this plant has actually been freed up. It's yellow. You can see it wasn't getting any sunlight. Here's one that either was cut a little bit, but it sure appears it's going to be just fine. If you zoom in here, you can see this plant here was freed up as well. So now that plant's going to live, a plant that appears to be unharmed. And now here is a plant that was cut. However, we'll come out here in a few days. That doesn't mean that plant is necessarily lost because the growing point is well below ground. Perhaps that'll still make it. But the aggressiveness of the planter, the consistency and the ability to maintain that depth has really been helpful in reducing that thick crust that oftentimes we can't get with a rotary hoe at this consistency. Hope you found this information helpful. Thanks for tuning in. Have a good day.